Hi everyone, Dr. Kofi here again, and welcome to the TutorMed channel, where everything medicine is simplified. In today's video, we will discuss an easy way to memorize the immunization schedule in Ghana. This topic is frequently tested in exam, especially in the areas of pediatrics and public health. Non-medical professionals and students will find this video very useful as it will provide education on childhood immunizations. Now, to encourage us to make more simplified videos like these, kindly take a few seconds to always like and share our videos and subscribe to our channel. And thank you for doing just that. Alright everyone, let's begin. Very good. And so before we look at how to remember the immunization schedule in Ghana, let's establish a few relevant points. The oral polio vaccine is one of the vaccines on the schedule, and it is a live attenuated vaccine, meaning this vaccine contains some live strains of the polio virus, but these viruses have been programmed not to be virulent. This vaccine, abbreviated as OPV, can be bivalent or trivalent. The trivalent oral polio vaccine contains the live strains of the viruses types 1, 2, and 3. And so because it contains 3 strains, it is named trivalent. And then the bivalent type, as the name suggests, will contain 2 strains, that is type 1 and type 3. Now previously in Ghana, we used the trivalent vaccine, but the strain 2 in it has been found to cause vaccine-associated paralytic poliomyelitis. And so because of that, the trivalent was abandoned, and we now use the bivalent formulation. The second important point before we zoom into the meat of today's discussion is that the vaccine MR stands for measles rubella vaccine. Measles rubella vaccine, and is now used instead of the measles mumps rubella vaccine. And so the point is that initially we used the MMR vaccine, but now or currently we use the MR vaccine, measles rubella vaccine. Then the last point is that Menafrivac is a vaccine for meningococcal meningitis, and it was added to the schedule since the year 2012. And so with these in mind, let's get to today's discussion properly. Now let's see how to memorize the immunization schedule. Our approach might not be straightforward, but you'd realize that it is probably better than rogue memorization. And so please follow me closely because I think you might find this very useful. And so we will begin by listening to a woman, a mother, who is concerned about her baby's immunizations. And so this is what she says. Let's listen. She says, "My child is going to be immunized from birth to 18 months. And so I decided to keep in mind what he will be given first and what he will be given last." So what he will be given first is at birth, and I realized it was BB. And so here, the B stands for BCG vaccine, which is given for TB, and then the bivalent oral polio vaccine, which is given for poliomyelitis. Now, the 0 there signifies that it is the first polio vaccine which is given, and so OPV 0. Then she continues, the last month, which is at 18 months, or the last vaccine, which is at 18 months, it's MM. So the first M stands for measles vaccine, and then the second M stands for the Menafrivac vaccine, the vaccine which is given for the meningococcal meningitis. So she ends her first narrative here. And so this narrative actually tells us when the immunization schedule begins and ends. So it begins at birth and ends at 18 months. And again, it tells us what vaccines are given at birth, which is what? BB, the BCG vaccine, and the bivalent oral polio vaccine. And then it tells us those which are given at 18 months, the measles vaccine, and then the meningococcal vaccine, which is the Men-Afrivac vaccine. I hope this makes a lot of sense. Very good. And so from her first narrative, this is what we can generate. Now, this mother is happy to have been able to keep the first and last details of her child's immunization schedule, and so she continues her narrative. She says, "When I looked at the schedule, I saw there are weeks and months. And when I studied closely, I saw there are 3 weeks, and then they were separated by 4. Then there were 3 months, separated by 3. And each of the categories, which is the weeks and the months, began with the number 6. I know this might sound confusing, but all she wants to say is that for the timelines, we have weeks and months. And there are 3 weeks and there are 3 months. So for the weeks, we have week number 1, 2, and 3. And for the months, we have month number 1, 2, and then 3. Please notice that this is outside of the first and then the last she had already studied. I mean the birth and the 18 months. And so she said that each of them began with the number 6. And so the weeks began with 6. So we have 6 weeks. And the months also began with 6. So we have 6 months. Then for the week category, they were separated by the number 4. And so from 6 weeks plus 4, you move to 10 weeks. And plus 4, you move to 14 weeks. And for the month category, it's also going to begin with 6. And so you have 6 months, but they are separated by 3. And so 6 plus 3, you have 9 months. And then 9 by 3 or plus 3, you have 12 months. So you see that if you study this narrative very well, it gives you the timelines for the various vaccinations. And so let's summarize that in the next slide. Very good. And so from her narrative so far, we can generate the various timelines for the immunization schedule. Please remember the first thing she did was to get what the baby will be given first and what the baby will be given last. And so she saw that the first is at birth and the last is at 18 months. And she did well to keep the first and the last vaccines. The first being BP, which is BCG for TB, and then bivalent oral polio vaccine for poliomyelitis. And then the 18 months the first M for measles, and then the last M for meningococcal meningitis, so the meningococcal vaccine. Very good. Then she came to study the schedule again, and then she saw that the timelines have been categorized into weeks and then months. She saw that there are 3 categories of the weeks and then 3 categories of the months. And then each of them started with the number 6. So for the weeks, we had 6 weeks, and for the months, we had 6 months. And she saw that the weeks are separated from each other by the number 4. So from 6 weeks, you move to 10 weeks, and then from 10 weeks, you move to 14 weeks. And then the month category were also separated by the number 3. And so from 6 months, you move to 9 months, and from 9 months, you move to 12 months. Pretty interesting, right? Now we know the vaccines which are given at birth and then 18 months. How about the other timelines? What vaccines are given? And so her narrative would lead us to get the vaccines which are given for the other timelines. And please do not forget to like and share this video if you have not done that yet, and kindly subscribe to our channel to support us. Good. And so the mother continues her narrative. She says, the vaccines my child gets in his week category are the same and can be remembered by using the abbreviation 3PR. So 3 P's and 1 R. The first P stands for the pentavalent vaccine, which is a 5-in-1 vaccine. Then the next P stands for the polio vaccine. So this is the bivalent oral polio vaccine. Then the third P stands for pneumococcal vaccine. And then the last, or the R, stands for rotavirus vaccine. What she means is that from 6 weeks and 10 weeks and 14 weeks, the vaccines given are the same. Only that in the last week, which is week 14, inactivated polio vaccine is given in addition to the oral polio vaccine. So that is the only difference. So let's take a look at the pentavalent vaccine, the 5-in-1 vaccine. It contains DPT2H. And so the D stands for the diphtheria vaccine, P for the pertussis vaccine, then T for tetanus vaccine. And then the first H stands for the Hep B vaccine, then the last H stands for Haemophilus influenza type B vaccine. And so from this narrative, we've been able to get the various vaccines given at week 6, 10, and 14 weeks. Good. So she continues her narrative. She says, "So I argued my point out that the vaccines are too much for my child, and so on her 6 months and 12 months anniversary, please, no vaccines." It means she would not be allowed, or she would not allow her child to be given any vaccines. So she continues the narrative. So the doctor said to agree on the condition that at 6 and 12 months, I bring my child for vitamin A supplementation, and that I should agree that my baby will have an MRI scan done at 9 months to check him up. End of narration. Now, this particular narrative tells us that at age 6 and 12 months, no vaccine is given according to the EPI in Ghana, only vitamin A. So at 6 months and 12 months, no vaccine, only vitamin A. Now, she mentions that the doctor said the baby will have an MRI done at 9 months. Now, MRI, when pronounced, may sound like MRY. And so please remember that MRI, when pronounced, may sound like MRY. And so it means at 9 months, she's getting MRY. The MR stands for the measles rubella vaccine, and then the Y there stands for yellow fever. And so, like I said, this is the end of a narrative, and hopefully this made sense. And so, at the end of this short narrative, we've been able to generate or memorize the timelines for the immunization schedule in Ghana and the various vaccines given in the immunization schedule in Ghana. So let's generate the whole schedule on our next slide using the summary of her narrative. Very good. And so let's generate the entire immunization schedule using the summary of this mother's narrative. And so she was able to keep the vaccines to be given at birth and then at 18 months. So at birth, she said it was BB, and then 18 months was MM. So at birth, the B stands for BCG vaccine, which is given for TB, and then the bivalent oral polio vaccine. Then the MM at 18 months, we have measles, and then the meningococcal vaccine, which is the Men-Afrivac. Then she saw that aside these things she's kept in mind, the timelines have been categorized into weeks and months, and there are 3 weeks in 3 weeks in the week period, and then 3 months in the months period. And each of them began with the number 6. And so for the week period, we have 6 weeks, and for the months period, we have 6 months. And she said that for the weeks period, they've been separated by the number 4. And so if the week period have been separated by the number 4, it means from 6 weeks you move to 10 weeks, and from 10 weeks you move to 14 weeks. And for the months category, she said they've been separated by the number 3. It means from 6 months you move to 9 months, and from 9 months you move to 12 months. Very good. And she said that she noticed that all the timelines in the week category have the same vaccinations. And so she said that all those vaccines can be remembered by the abbreviation 3PR. And so the first P stands for Penta, second P, polio, next P, pneumococcal and rota. And so for 6 weeks, we have Penta, polio, pneumococcal, and then rota. For 10 weeks, the same thing. Penta, polio, pneumococcal, rota. The 14 weeks, Penta. But she said that the difference here is that in addition to the oral polio, in the 14-week period, you add the inactivated polio vaccine, IPV. And so we have oral polio plus IPV, then it continues, pneumococcal, and then rota. Then she makes mention of the fact that she thinks the immunizations are too much for her child. And so if the doctor can spare the child at 6 months and then 12 months, the doctor agreed and said that he would only do that if he or the woman will bring the child for vitamin A supplementations. And then the child would have an MRI done at 9 months. And so for the 6 months and then 12 months, we have only vitamin A. And then we said that at 9 months, that will be MRI. But MRI can be, when pronounced, can sound like MRY. And so MRY at 9 months stands for measles rubella vaccine, and then the Y stands for yellow fever. And so by using this narrative or understanding this narrative, we can be able to, or we can generate the entire immunization schedule. I hope this was useful, and I hope this helped. In our next slide, let's see a question which was asked in the GMDC exam, and then with our knowledge now, answer that question. Very good. And so let's look at the question. The question says, Sharif is a 10-month-old infant who was brought to your clinic on account of fever. List the vaccines he should have at this age, or he should have had at this age. So you know that it is from birth to 10 months. So from birth, we know that it is BB, and so the BCG vaccine and then the bivalent oral polio vaccine. Then the second is 3 doses each of the pentavalent vaccine, the polio vaccine, the pneumococcal vaccine, and rotavirus vaccine. And on the 14th month, we add IPV to the oral polio. And so note that the oral polio given at birth is OPV 0. And so the oral polio vaccines given at 6 weeks will be OPV 1, then at 10 weeks OPV 2, then at 14 weeks OPV 3. Then remember that at 6 months, and then 6 months no vaccine, and so that's vitamin A. And then at 9 months, the child would have the MRI scan, and so we have measles rubella vaccine and then yellow fever. So using the woman's narrative, we've been able to answer this question without struggling to memorize the table mechanically. And so this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you for watching again this episode of TutorMed. Please do not forget to like and share our video, and then subscribe to our channel if you have not done that yet. So we will see each other, or I'll meet you in our next video. Until then, bye.
Wooooow.